If anybody wants any hard candy or chocolate, there's stuff on the table back there.
So my sugar crash ends in about an hour.
How was Boyers? What did you got there?
I had shrimp tacos. Carla had fish and chips.
Uh-huh.
She had a Pinot Grigio, and they had a Trobe's
Okay.
double
So-
IPA.
Okay, some kind of-
Okay, so he is on,
Yeah.
so we just let him
They were that
know.
good.
Really? I got home and I was like, you want some milk? I'm like, nah, better not.
Yeah.
As much as I could have
Well,
grabbed a beer or a glass of
oh,
vino.
yeah.
Oh, lowercase. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Something's mixed up that way.
Thursday should be, we
Just
should
an
finish this
introduction.
whole thing tonight. Thursday should be an introduction
Not
and then a walk.
That'd be,
Unless unless we're gonna
amend something.
amend or.
you guys see Wiley's email?
Did,
I
yeah,
just
I didn't
responded.
respond yet to it, but yes,
I just did. I told him, yeah,
It's
spend the day on.
interesting that he brings that up because it is becoming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you guys.
Well, I hear it every day on
Yeah,
Cumberland.
yeah.
Spend the day on Cumberland.
It's actually
Street.
funny.
Yeah.
On Sunday night, sitting in the dining room, Sarah said to me, she said, "Where's that music coming from?" I said, "I think it's coming from Mike and Yvonne's house." She goes, "Well, that's what I thought because it's not loud enough to be a car."
Yeah,
So yeah, it's
It's,
kind of crazy.
yeah, and to read,
Well,
Wiley's email,
we-
he says sitting there in his conference room.
we've sat out at downtown lounge in the evening, we had dinner, and how many times the cars go by, it's just like, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in some circumstances, it's easy. It's difficult to tell how loud it is outside the car when you're in the car. But I mean, the circumstances we're talking about are excessive.
Yeah.
And usually they have their windows open.
Yeah.
When your
Okay,
windows
we're
are
good on
down-
everything? Thank
Yeah, when
you for
you're-
getting
I
it
don't
set
think
up.
my car gets as loud as.
Yeah.
Good evening. Welcome to our November 9th budget meeting. All city council is present. Mayor, thank you for you and your staff for being here. We're ready for you to proceed.
Okay, so we do have one individual in attendance this evening on Zoom. His name is Alisher Amnavo. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And if you have any questions, if you just want to raise your hand at the appropriate time when we allow for public comment, you can make a comment or you can ask a question. So we have someone monitoring that. So if you just want to, again, raise your hand and then we will acknowledge you at that time at the appropriate time. So thank you for attending and we wish you well. So at our first budget hearing, we had ended at the police department expenditures. So we're going to start at Fire Station 1. For everyone that's following along, Melissa has the budget up on sharing the screen for those on Zoom. So we have, we maintain 3 fire stations, and expenditures for Fire Station 1, which is located at 8th and Orange, that's going to decrease by $1,900 or 5.6% due to a decrease in contracted services. I'm going to kind of give you a summary and then I'll go through it line item by line item. But the building and grounds maintenance for Fire Station 2, which is located at 9th and Mifflin, that's going to increase by $700. And that's because we're including the transferring of a roof replacement project that we did not do this year because of projected revenue loss of COVID. And we're going to put that into 2021. And at Fire Station 3, which is located near 7th on Maple, will increase by $1,300. And that's mainly due to an increase in contracted service and natural gas usage. So looking at Fire Station 1, for the most part, the expenditures remain, for the most part, the same. There's going to be a $1,900 decrease to $31,800, like I indicated just a minute ago. And I'm just going to continue on the line of the fire stations. So I'm going to skip back to page 16 of 25. And again, for the most part, except for an increase in the building maintenance and repairs, and that's because there was a small increase due to we're a year down the road with the roof over the living area, and also the roof over the engine room, so that slightly went increased as well. And we're replacing a door seal on one of the overhead doors. And then again, like I indicated, decreasing contracted services. So overall, it's only increasing by $700 or a little more than 1%. And then Fire Station 3, for the most part, there's a slight increase to the contracted services for exhaust filters on the furnace. So it will increase by $1,300 or 9.5% to $14,950. So now we're going to go back to the big piece of the fire department, which is the Bureau of Fire itself. So again, like I indicated at Budget Workshop 1, if you look at the first few lines, that's your primary salary portion, and the administrative leave, vacation, personal leave, sick leave. If you add all of those lines together, you would get the true indication of what the salary is for that particular person or persons. So looking at fire management, and this is something that I had indicated under revenue when we were receiving in the fire grant for the first time into the general fund, because it's standard for us to receipt that into the capital reserve fund. And then we've done several projects over the years. This year, in combination with the Washington Fire Company, we're doing a fob system and an access control device on the fire stations so that we don't need to have key entry. For at least the next, what I'm anticipating to be 5 years, that fire grant will be put into the general fund to help with the cost potentially of hiring a deputy fire commissioner. Now, several years ago, actually right before I became mayor, in fact, I think the last time we had a deputy fire commissioner was in 2008, I believe, when that fire commissioner had resigned, or that position was eliminated from the budget. We have not had a deputy fire commissioner, and our volunteer fire chiefs, there were 3 and sometimes 4 of them, helped to relieve the fire commissioner from after hours or weekends, or even during the day if he had a meeting or just took off, went on vacation. There were people to relieve him from his administrative duties or fireground duties. And we've talked about this for several years now. Our volunteer numbers have diminished, and that's not just something that is happening here in Lebanon City or in Lebanon County or in the state of Pennsylvania. It's happening all over. It's just getting more and more difficult for people to volunteer. And, especially to volunteer running into a building that's on fire, that even lessens the number of willing volunteers to do a job like that. So we had 2 really great long tenured volunteer fire chiefs. And the one decided that he had enough and he was going to hang it up. And then our chief got a promotion at his job. And he said he has a lot of traveling to do and a lot of learning to do. And he just did not feel that he would be able to give the appropriate amount of time that would be necessary. So he also resigned, and that was the beginning of September. So since March and September, we did take on a 3rd volunteer chief, but he does not live in the city, and he did not have some of the qualifications that we wanted our fire chiefs to have, at least today's standards with what we're looking at. And he needed to get institutional knowledge of our firemen, of our fire stations, of our city in general, our equipment, the types of buildings we have. I mean, not everyone is a fire history buff like our fire commissioner. I mean, he can tell you every single type of roof. I mean, his knowledge is just, no one could compare to it. So someone needs to work and, put some time into it and learn those things. So he's been working with Dwayne probably for about a year now, in a more of an administrative type position, and also kind of shadowing him on the fireground. And he also just completed his firefighter 2, and just got his certification, his certificate last week, I believe. But again, we've been short on some type of a volunteer chief position for almost as long as I've been mayor. And we've been able to get by. But by losing these two tenured, the chief and the assistant chief, that was huge. Looking at our volunteer fire roster, looking to see who made a commitment of at least 50 calls a year, someone who is quite serious and has given us some time, and also looking to see who has the qualifications that we believe a chief should have. We really were uncertain if there was really anyone there that would meet that grade. Now, I've kind of put out a plea that before we go to this next step that I'm proposing to you in this budget, we said, okay, here's one last chance. We're putting the call out there if there are any volunteer firefighters that are interested in a volunteer chief position to let us know before we move forward with this. And we did have one person who indicated an interest, but we have not vetted him yet. So I don't know if that will be a serious candidate or not. He was on our original roster, and I don't want to minimize, anything that he may be able to bring to the table without looking into it more fully. But what I'm proposing at this point, because again, that would be one person plus the person that we have now. I'm not sure that we can get the number of hours that those two chiefs that resigned were able to give us. They were in the 300 plus calls a year. And, the volunteers that we had on the roster that we thought maybe we would at least consider were nowhere even close to that. So that's why I'm still proposing that we move forward with what I have here in the budget. But again, we may go down that road of volunteer, but I think I'm still probably going to end up, or at least I'd like to move forward with this, and we'll regroup. There would be money in the budget if we decide to go to the volunteer route. This would at least guarantee that the money's there in case it doesn't work out. So in the first line item, you're going to see a fire commissioner and a deputy fire commissioner. So that is going to put a boost there on that line item of $49,252, or a 66.5% increase. And it is because of adding the position. And that is the only position that we're talking about adding into the budget. Because again, we take, the loss of revenue for COVID and some of the other projects that we're doing very seriously. But we also need to make sure that we have adequate fire protection for our citizens and our businesses. And we've talked about for several years that it may come to this point. I just didn't think it would be in the year 2021. I thought it would be maybe a couple more years down the road, but that's where we are. So again, the next several line items, you'll see the different types of benefits that go along with the salary. If you move to the next page, if we go down to office supplies, we're proposing $100 more at $900, postage the same at $900, vehicle fuel the same at $16,000. And I just want to note that the volunteer companies are not only struggling with manpower and the number of volunteers, but with finances as well. And in 2019, the collective group asked us to pick up the cost of the fuel that's used in the fire apparatus that we use to respond to calls for service and for inspections. And so we budgeted an additional $8,000 in the budget year 2020 to address that. So we're proposing to maintain that activity in 2021. So it's no increase from last year's budget to this budget, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. General expenses, 200 less at 800. Operating supplies, 500 less at 2,000. Vehicle repairs, 1,000 more at 15,000. Hardware and software maintenance for the MDTs, slightly less at 2,500. So fire chief services, you're going to see a 100% decrease here. There's no money budgeted. There should be, in last year's budget, 14,320. So with all of the volunteer fire chiefs positions that we were funding, which was 3, that's how much we were paying them in stipends. So between utilizing this money and then the 4,000 odd dollars of the grant, that's about $28,000. So it would pay for a portion of this deputy fire commissioner position, but it doesn't add up to the whole amount. I want to be transparent on that. So the fire prevention program would remain the same at 900. Communication would slightly decrease to 3,100. Communications for radio and equipment maintenance would decrease to 500, and that's mainly because we're getting new radios, and the 2 years before just got the new self-breathing apparatus, so we don't feel like there will be a lot of repairs that will be necessary. Budgeting the same for advertising and printing at 800. Equipment maintenance and repair, 1,000 less at 3,000. Dues, subscriptions, and memberships the same at 2,000. Contracted services, the same at 5,500. Civil service to create an eligibility list, the same at 2,500. Training would be the same at 6,500. The volunteer fire relief, this is an in and out. I talked to you about this line item in revenue. This money comes in, we have 30 days to turn it over to the Relief Association. That's going to be $73,114. We give $4,000 to each of the 9 volunteer fire companies to help with their expenses. That's the same at $36,000. Safety equipment and safety clothing. We need to purchase 4 turnout gear next year. Safety glasses, clothing, issued uniforms. That's going to remain the same at $25,000, and we're not budgeting for any vehicle replacement. So there's an increase of $197,111, which is a 7.2%. The total Bureau of Fire is $2,935,893. Now, that is mainly due to the increase in the accrued amount that we're setting back for the medical costs, and also, of course, because of the addition of the Deputy Fire Commissioner position. If you take the 3 fire stations and the Bureau of Fire budget and put them all together, it's going to increase by $197,211, $100 more, or 6.92%. So we also, in the Public Safety Department, we also have health and housing, and this is where our code inspectors are budgeted. So we employ 1 full-time supervisor inspector and 5 part-time code inspectors. Since I became mayor in 2010, we've added 1 full-time and 1 part-time inspector positions to the division, and it's been able to increase the number of new cases by 172%. That's pretty significant. We're pretty proud of that. But because of that, it caused some growing pains, and we needed to get organized. And so that is, in the 2020 budget is when we added the supervisory role, and that was to help guide those employees and support them And it has made a huge difference. It really has, because before we were really concentrating on public nuisance type enforcement, which is important for quality of life. But if we want to make sure that we are not adding to the blight rolls, and we're addressing those blighted properties or properties that are not, the buildings are not maintained, we're starting to see that we're able to do more of that, and that's really important. The other thing, by adding this position, it has also allowed for an increased food safety inspection and food handling improvements. So that's been huge with our restaurants, and Glenn has been very helpful in educating people on, the handling of food and what you need to do to keep things safe. And we were able to talk to the state and get classes in Spanish. So those were just held pretty recently, a few weeks ago, because we do have a lot of Hispanic eating licenses out that are issued. So that's important. And we did have some people attend that class. So that was a real good thing. So 3 of our part-time inspectors are paid through our CDBG funding, and the other 2 would come out of the general fund. So you'll see the supervisory, full-time supervisory and food safety inspector, a full-time aide, part-time aide, and then again 2 part-time inspectors. And then also our health officer, which is Dr. Yoakum, is all in this category, in this division. So again, the first several line items are the salary and the benefits. So if you skip down to office supplies, slight decrease to $3,500 from $4,200. Our postage, again, because we're anticipating an increase in postage, it will increase by $200 to $4,500. Our vehicle fuel remain the same at $3,000. Operating supplies the same at $3,000. Vehicle repairs the same at $1,500. Sorry. Operating supplies at $1,500. Vehicle repairs the same at $3,000. So mediation services, that's really an excellent program. Jubilee Ministries was handling that for us as long as I've been mayor. And in 2020, they stopped providing that service. So we've been trying to find another organization that will take that over, because we feel, although there isn't a lot of use for it, the couple of times that it does get used, more times than not, there is some success to the program. So we always want it to be an option. We don't want to eliminate options. We want to keep our options on the table. And basically, for those of you who don't know what that is, if you have really a civil dispute between neighbors, and it just seems like, okay, well, they're doing this, and it could be cultural differences. It could just be generational. It could be a variety of reasons of why they're not getting along. And instead of continually calling the police department out, we try and say, would you be interested in using mediation? And then we have this, unbiased, independent, and it was Jubilee Ministries, a counselor that would sit down with them, talk to them, get them to agree to things that each of them would do to try and resolve their differences. And again, we've had, some success with it. I'm not going to say it's perfect and that every time it worked, but it has had success. So we would like to try and find another organization to keep that going. So we would like to keep that in the budget. Communication, this is mainly our wireless service, the same at $3,800. Advertising and printing, the same at $2,500. Contracted services, the same at $18,000. Now, some of this you'll see, this is not a total wash and in and out, because not everyone pays us back for the services. If someone's not mowing their lawn, and we've given them quite a number of notices, or they've walked away from their property and there are other issues with it, and we have to call in an independent contractor to take care of it, we will bill the property owner. If it gets high enough to a certain dollar amount, then we'll actually place a lien on the property. But sometimes the people will pay us and sometimes they don't pay us. So our expenditure is usually a lot more than the revenue that's coming in. But if if they don't pay the bill, we'll either file charges, get restitution, or file a lien, and eventually one day getting it when they sell the property. Training will remain the same at $5,000. So total health and housing is an increase of $19,009 for a total of $297,207. It represents a 6.8% increase. And that's mainly due to the increase in the amount accrued for the medical costs.
Mayor, if I can stop for just one second. First of all, I just really want to commend all these departments, the inspectors, the fire department, the police department, for just doing an excellent job and staying within their budgets and working really hard, because they do a fantastic job for the city. Second of all, is there any questions from council? Okay.
I was going to kind of wait until we got towards the end of public safety here, but I have a sneaking suspicion that over the next decade, the fire department is going to be a big source of struggle for us. I know the fire commissioner gave us a nice presentation a couple months ago on age of equipment and some things that were coming down the pipe that are definitely going to cause some significant challenges for the city. Obviously, none of that is addressed in here, and we're not setting anything aside for that impending situation.
Yes, we are.
We are?
Mhm.
Okay. Did I miss that?
Well, it's in capital reserve
Okay. Thank you.
and CDBG funding. So our first piece of equipment is the rescue truck. And so we have a plan where we'll be meeting with, or I'll be meeting with the independent fire company in the next couple of weeks to talk about a purchase for a replacement rescue truck next year, the end of next year. What we'd like to do is use some of our CDBG funding to meet our 25% contribution that's set by city ordinance. And then the next piece of equipment would be to refurbish one of the ladder trucks. And we're estimating that that would cost about $60,000. And I have that in capital reserve because I can't use CDBG funding for refurbishing. It would have to be a new piece of equipment. So we'll use what we have in capital reserve to go towards that. And then the ladder truck replacement, that's going to be huge. We believe we're going to use CDBG money for a portion of it. And maybe I'm hoping to have a little bit more by the time that comes around. I may have to push that out a year or two compared to what the commissioner would like. But that's something that we'll be discussing over the next several months. But I do have somewhat of a plan in my mind, and of course with input from the commissioner and the other volunteer fire companies that would be involved in it. So I think we have a game plan. Another thing that we may do is we may, without getting into too much, without talking to the volunteer companies, but there may be a change in equipment. So we have a plan. And we're setting it in motion, I guess you could say.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions from council? And I just wanted to stop and say, is there any questions from the public? Okay, thank you. Okay, Mayor, sorry for.
Okay, that's okay. So under emergency management, this is something that we pay 70 cents per capita. It's based on the 2010 census. Once the 2020 census is completed and those numbers are officially issued, and I'm sure our number will increase, then this would go up as well. But for the last 10 years, it's been $17,834, and that goes to DES. And then our ambulance services, this was something that was new last year. We entered into or committed to a 3-year agreement. Last year was $4 per capita, or I should say 2020. 2021 budget will be $4.50, and then 2022 would be $5 per capita. This goes into a special fund that they may use for vehicles and capital expenditures on equipment and things like that. They've been excellent in keeping us informed and communicating with us on making the purchases. And sorry, on the table and the vibration, it's very loud. So they've been doing an excellent job in keeping us informed. So I just wanted to pass that along to you guys. So there will be an increase to $114,647. So our total public safety department is $3,474,681. That represents a $228,959 increase, or a little over 7%. And, sorry, lost my page. Yep, okay. And again, that's mainly going to be because of the accrual for medical costs, the deputy fire commissioner position, and the increase in the ambulance service contribution. So if there's no questions for public safety, I'm going to go to public works. Okay, so we had a little bit of for my rookie councilman who asked very good questions. Back when I first became mayor, our budget was not totally converted to the chart of accounts. If you guys remember when I talked to you about the state chart of accounts, it's a uniformed accounting code for the finances of a local municipality. So when you look at 410, you know that's police. When you look at 302, you know it's fire. When you look at 201, or it sets out for revenues and expenditures, so that if you go to Lebanon City or Allentown City and you look at those numbers, you pretty well know, okay, that expenditure is for this type of item, okay? So the city of Lebanon was not totally using that system when I came here. And so there were some line items that we phased out and brought new line. We did a whole conversion of the budget. So until we got past the point where, if you see how many years of history I have here, so we can see trends. So until we actually got so many years out, we had to keep the old line items and the new line items so that you could do a proper comparison. So we finally got to the point where we're enough years out that some of those line items are not shown on the budget, but they're still in the file, the spreadsheet, just so that we have history from as far back as we've been maintaining it. So we noticed today when Cheryl was putting together the ordinance for you that one of these lines that wasn't shown for some reason got $250 in it. And when we went through here, we didn't see it because it wasn't showing. So I have to change by $250. It's to the better. So it was in engineering? Yes. Okay. So I'll start and then I'll tell you where it was. So the first couple of line items, again, are for salary. So we have our public works director, our full-time administrative aide, and then the administrative leave, vacation, and sick. So if we move down to office supplies are increasing by $100 to $1,600. Postage is decreasing to $1,200. And that's because we're going to have less paving notices go out. Now, vehicle fuel, this is about where that line that wasn't shown, this one has $250, so we think it must have it was a similar category for vehicle fuel, but it was called something else for vehicles. So it must have just accidentally got that $250 in it as well. So general expenses, $100 more to $800. Vehicle repairs, the same at $500. Advertising and printing, the same at $100. Contracted services, the same at $65,700. A lot of the projects that we were going to do in this budget year, we've just moved into next budget year. And then training, an increase of $100 to $800. So really, if you want to change this, the total should be $239,193. Not 443, but 193. Now that represents a $12,802 increase, or 5.64%. Keep losing my pages here. And that's mainly due to the increase in the amount accrued for medical cost. So moving to highway general services, this is where our mechanic and our highway supervisor would come out of this division. So again, the first several line items will be their salary and benefits. And again, if you just want to take notice to the medical benefit, again, that increase is due to that accrual that we had to increase. So looking at heating, we increased it by 1,000 to 6,000. Vehicle fuel, the same at 6,300. Clothing and uniforms, that's a contractual issue, the same at 2,600. General expenses, the same at 1,000. Operating supplies, $700 increase to 4,700. Vehicle repairs, the same at 2,500. Communication, the same at 8,700. Advertising and printing, the same at 100. Electric decreased to by 1,000 to 7,000. Natural gas, $500 increase to 5,500. Water and sewer, the same at 1,500. Garbage removal, $500 decrease to 10,000. Building maintenance and repairs. Okay. So that is an $18,000 increase from 7,500 to 25,500. And that is because the Brandt building that we picked up during the bridge project, that needs a new roof. And so we're calling that Highway North because it's the most northern highway garage building. Contracted services, there's a huge decrease there of $40,000 or a 95% decrease from 42,000 to 2,000. And that is because last year we had a $40,000 upgrade to the fuel system that's at the highway compound. So we are doing that this year. We were going to try and push it off into next year, but we're having some problems with it. So we need to move forward and make that happen this year. The training, the same at 500. So overall, there's a $7,643 decrease to $260,112. That's mainly due to the difference in cost for the fuel system upgrade at the highway garage in 2020 versus the roof replacement at the Highway North Brandt building. We're getting a gas burner replacement at the 10th and Oak garage. And then, of course, the increase in the amount accrued for medical costs in 2021. The next division is traffic control. We have 2 full-time maintenance workers in that category. And then we have 1 summer help that paints curbs and helps with signs. So again, the first several line items will be salary and benefits. If you move down to vehicle fuel, slight $300 decrease to $3,000. Our total traffic control operating supplies, $1,000 decrease to $19,000. Signs and paint for parking lots and curbs, the same at $3,000. Vehicle repairs increased to $5,000 from $3,500. Printed forms, a $100 increase to $1,000. Maintenance and repair of machinery and equipment. This is increasing by $2,500, and that's because we're adding a grinder that is needed at $2,500. So that's $6,500. Contracted services, $1,000 increase. Again, all of the upgrades that we were going to do to the signals are being pushed into the 2021 budget. So it's a $1,000 increase to $53,900. Training, the same at $300. The Colt Act 3 contribution is no longer a requirement. We're not budgeting for that. Street lights and parking lot supplies, we're budgeting the same at $4,500. Electricity for the parking lots, the same at $3,000. And then the next 3 line items is a part-time 2 employees for meter collection. Parking meter repairs and maintenance, $500 increase to $16,000. And again, we did not refurbish any of the parking meters this year, so that will just go into next year. Contracted services, $11,700 decrease to $53,000 from $64,700. And that is mainly because we were going to do a pilot with a parking kiosk, and we're proposing to not do that for right now. So the total division is $344,968. It's a $3,502 increase, or a little more than 1%. The increase in the medical accrual is basically a wash because of eliminating the kiosk project. And again, we're proposing to pave the 9th and Walton lot, so we rescheduled that from this year to next year. So that is remaining in the budget. The next category, highway maintenance and repairs. We have our crew chief in this position and an equipment operator, and then we have 2 full-time fall and winter seasonal help that they help with yard waste and leaves and plowing. So again, the first several line items will represent the salary and benefits. So if you move down to operating supplies, budgeting the same at $14,000, vehicle fuel for winter services the same at $6,500, vehicle repairs to the equipment and vehicles that are mainly the larger ones for winter, budgeting the same at $10,000, repairs of tools and machinery the same at $500, vehicle fuel the same at $4,000, vehicle repairs $1,000 less to $6,000, minor equipment purchase, this is decreasing to $2,900 because we're not purchasing a trailer like we had budgeted in the 2020 budget. We're not going to do that, but they do need a tamper, and I want them to have a tamper, so they need the tamper. Paving, the money that we get directly from the county, which is basically an in and an out for them based on population. It's liquid fuel money that must be expended from the general fund. That's $25,477, and then we're budgeting $30,000 to repair sinkholes. So that's the same at $55,477. And then $100 increase to training because we anticipate that it'll be a little bit more than what we had originally anticipated for underground tank training. So it's a total of $276,036. It's an $8,114 or 3% increase. And that's mainly due to the amount accrued for medical costs. It's somewhat diminished by not transferring the purchase of a trailer from the 2020 budget to the 2021 budget. So street cleaning, we have 2 street cleaning operators, full-time. The first several line items, again, are salary and benefits. If you move down to vehicle fuel, budgeting $500 less at $9,000. Vehicle repairs, $1,800 less at $7,000. Sweeper debris removal, the same at $30,000. So it's an $11,063 increase to $202,683. And that is mainly due to the increase amount for medical costs. Parks and playgrounds, we have 2 full-time maintenance workers and 5 part-time normally. We did not hire our part-time people this year to try and make up for the loss of revenue. So if you skip down after you pass the salary and benefits to vehicle fuel, slightly less, $600 less to $5,000. General expenses, slightly less to $4,500. Operating supplies the same at $2,500. Vehicle repairs, $1,000 less to $5,000. Electric the same at $7,000. Natural gas the same at $1,000. Water sewer the same at $2,000. Garbage removal the same at $2,200. Grounds maintenance. So this is an increase of $4,210 to $24,390. And that is mainly because we're continuing with the program that we have in place for the Chestnut Street Island. There are trees there that one needs to be removed and several others need to be trimmed professionally because there's value to them. They're very large, and like we made, I don't want to say a big deal out of it, but I think we did the American elm tree just a couple months ago. It's one of the only remaining ones that they're aware of in this region. And we believe it goes back to the time of George Washington. So, I mean, it's something that we want to try and safeguard. I think it's worth it. It already had a partial failure, so we're trying to keep it from having any more, but it's still a significant tree even with the partial failure. So again, you know, we have streets on both sides of that island, and it's a nice piece of history for us. I think I've talked about this before, about it being called Park Place. A lot of attorneys and the district attorney back in the day resided along Park Place. It was named after the New York's Park Place, which is also part of the Monopoly game, but that is not what they were thinking when they named it that. It was after New York's Park Place. So the next line item is improvement, repairs, and maintenance. And we had some sidewalk improvements at some of city-owned properties that we're pushing into the 2021 budget. And also, we need to do curbing replacement repairs along 10th Street, because I think I may have touched on this before, but initially our 42272 phasing project was Walnut Street Phase 1, Cumberland Street Phase 2, 10th Street Phase 3, 9th Street Phase 4. So we have applied on 2 occasions for 2 different grants to do a streetscape improvement program in the downtown. There are a lot of great positive things happening, or were happening, in the downtown. We have lost some businesses. Some new businesses have opened, but we don't want to give up our hopes and dreams for the revitalization of our downtown. I think it's going to be a good, positive movement to hopefully move city offices downtown. And we also, at the same time, if you look at our sister cities like Easton and other cities, you know, a lot of their revitalization efforts included doing a streetscape program. It really, if you go to visit any of those cities that did have a streetscape improvement program in place, it just looks very fresh, brand new, vital, you know, vibrant. So I don't want to give up on that vision. And so we want to continue to apply several more times. We don't want to give up. So we ran out of time, basically. So we asked PennDOT to move Cumberland Street to the end of the entire resurfacing project. That will hopefully give us at least 2 more years that we can apply and hopefully maybe get the grant, because without the grant, it just cannot be afforded by the residents and or the city. So that's our goal. So there are improvements that we have to make along 10th Street because, as I said, we want to move that to phase 2, move it up to phase 2. So that's like what we're worst case scenario, $60,000 that we would have to do. So this line item would increase by $12,992 or 20% to $77,392. Building repairs and maintenance, a $2,000 increase to $16,500. Equipment maintenance and repairs. We're throwing in a much smaller trailer for our mowers. We can get by with a not quite as construction grade. So we moved it into a different category, and it's like half or more than half, but less than what the other trailer was. So that would be an increase to $4,000. Our training would remain the same at $250. So altogether, there would be a $32,376 increase, not quite 11%, to $332,624. And that's for all the reasons that I just explained. Okay, now we're going to move to the municipal building. So if you remember to the first night under revenue, I said we created a new line item for revenue from HAC. So if everything goes through with the purchase of the HAC building, Hack would be a tenant and the city would own the building, and Hack would reimburse the city for their share of utilities. So we also have to account for the expenditures for a half a year at the Hack building. So you're going to see some increases in several line items here, because we'll still be paying our share here, and then we'll be paying for a portion of the year next year. So the first line item, except for $2,000, represents the cost here. So it's an increase of $1,500 to $13,500. The contracted services for cleaning would represent cleaning services here, and it would also represent partial cleaning services at Hack, and also the maintenance agreements on equipment and facility equipment like pumps and HVAC and cooling towers and things like that. So that's going to increase by $36,185 to $57,185. Shared electric, it's going to be electric here and electric there. It'll increase by $36,590 to $69,590. Shared personnel cost, again, this will increase by $38,500 to $72,500. Shared natural gas will increase by $13,800 to $18,400. Shared communications, this is going to decrease because the city was paying for leasing telephone equipment, and that lease agreement is finished. So it's a $10,000 or 67% decrease to $7,500. The shared maintenance and repairs here, we're not estimating anything for Hack because we'll be renovating Hack, so we won't have maintenance of anything. It will be just in the renovation cost. So this, we're budgeting the same at $64,000. Shared water and sewer, that would be here and at Hack. So that would be an increase to $3,812. And shared garbage removal would also include Hack. So that would increase from $1,200 to $3,850. So for the most part, 2021 is going to be a little bit of a bear. But if we look to the big picture, in 2022, it would only maybe be a couple months of both. And then it'll just be, hopefully the one facility. And it's the first couple of years where we just need to sharpen our pencils and, do what we need to do, which is why we've been getting our house in order for many years. We got our cash flow improved. We got money in capital reserve. We've made a lot of improvements. We've been doing maintenance where we were not able to do maintenance before. But we got our house in order, and we've been able to replace roofs and replace equipment and replace vehicles. And we may need to take a couple years where we have to maybe not replace 2 police vehicles and only replace 1, or wait a year or 2 to replace a fire truck instead of. So we may need to stretch things out a little bit, but the end goal is we will be downtown helping to revitalize the downtown. And after that initial 5-year period of time, we'll be good. So we just need to plan it accordingly, and we'll be fine. So the total municipal building expenditures would increase by $120,737 to a total of $310,337. So if we move to the next division, which is building and zoning, we have a full-time zoning officer position and a part-time clerk position. So again, the first several line items represent the salaries and benefits. If we move down to the last line item on that page is postage, budgeting the same at $1,500. Vehicle fuel, budgeting the same at $500. General expenses, budgeting the same at $30,000. Operating supplies the same at 500. Vehicle repairs the same at 250. Communication the same at 800. Advertising and printing the same at 4,000. Dues, subscriptions, and memberships the same at 900. Contracted services the same at 500. Training the same at 750. There's a $9,023 increase to $132,457. That's mainly due to the increase in the amount accrued for medical costs. The MS4 division, we contract or we hire 2 part-time employees in the summer for a few weeks we're required by DEP, EPA to conduct inspections of all of our outfalls. We have about 290, if I'm remembering from memory. And our catch basins, we have not quite 1,200 of them, I believe. So the first couple line items will be for those part-time employees. If you move down to vehicle fuel, we're budgeting the same at 400. General expenses, we're budgeting the same at 8,000. Operating supplies, the same at 2,000. Vehicle repairs, the same at 1,000. And contracted services, increasing it to 68,000. We're adding a boom rental so that we can better take care of the stream banks and the concrete channels with the grass debris, tree debris that's growing in them. So we have a lot of work to do to get caught up on that. So that total division will increase by $3,574, 4.5% increase to $83,241.
Mayor, has any of that been transpiring this year?
Yes.
Okay.
We did rent it this year, and we did start to do it, but we have a lot more to do. And then our shade tree, we're increasing that by 1,000 to 2,000, and that's mainly because we're doing a tree share program. We have a shade tree commission, and they do an excellent job. It's all volunteers, and we're noticing that a lot of trees are not being replaced once they're removed, and people are having a difficult time, even though you think, okay, it's, several $100s, but some people have a hard time being able to afford that. So we would like to try and share in the cost. This is something that if we can get a grant for it, we're going to, but we weren't successful the last time we applied for it, and share in the cost of getting the tree. But it's important that we replace our treescape. So moving to recycling, we have a part-time recycling coordinator and a part-time attendant at the recycling yard. So the first couple line items will be their salary and benefits. Moving down to vehicle fuel, we're decreasing by 2,000 to 3,000. General expenses budgeting the same at 2,000. Operating supplies budgeting the same at 1,200. Vehicle repairs the same at 4,000. Communication at our yard waste gate, 200 less to 2,000. Printed forms the same at 500. Electric the same at 700. Water sewer the same at 2,000. Garbage removal the same at 700. And then improvement, repairs, and maintenance. We are upgrading the camera at the yard waste facility, and we had that in last year's budget, but there's a software upgrade that needs to be done as well to that. This will increase by $3,000 to $11,000. Our recycling tipping fee, we're increasing by $200 to $29,200. And this is for our yard waste removal, leaf removal, bulky waste removal, tires, the transfer fees for all of the commingles and whatnot. And then we're budgeting $500, the same as last year, for educational outreach, which we're required to do by DEP regarding recycling. And so that is will increase by $3,542 or 3.68%. And that's mainly due to the increase in the cost to upgrade the camera system at the yard waste facility. So I talked about how we need to do the fuel system upgrade, and the fuel system has not been upgraded since 1960. And if you would go and look at the pumps today, you would say, yeah, that's from 1960. So again, we've been having some problems, which we think it may be in a line. And some software, it needs to be updated. So again, that's going to happen this year. But at the same time, when the company was out, they indicated to us that we need to start thinking sooner rather than later, like to do this in the next preferably 2 years before DEP comes down and says you have to do it. We need to do it. And that is upgrading our tanks. And we have 2 tanks. Well, let me tell you, wow. That's all I'm going to say is wow. So we need to start reserving money for that. We need to save for that project. It's not something that you can just tackle in one budget year. So the cost to do that is $300,000. So we are proposing to put $80,000 in the budget. Now, we have looked at what is the life expectancy of the tanks and the system and all of that. And we can still break even before the end of the life expectancy, but it would be pretty darn close. So it's like, okay, do you really do it? But the convenience of having the fuel there for when you have fire and police and public works for snow plowing, you can't put a price on that. And I'll tell you what, when we first, and Richard was here, but I don't think anyone else was here, back in 2010, when I first started, there was an incident that occurred with our fuel, and we actually had like the federal government involved looking at this. We weren't sure if someone tampered with our fuel and put something in the fuel tank, or if we got a bad batch of gas from the supplier. We were never successful in determining that, and we tried very, very hard because a lot of vehicles, there was an expense to that. So we looked at that time of going out to a Sheetz or some other fleet vehicle management system, fueling system. And I had asked, we met with, and I hate to say their name, but we met with the one supplier, and I asked them specifically, do you ever close? Because we have operations that are 24/7 and you can never close. I have to know that I can get gas from you 24/7, 365, because that is what we work. And they were like, no, we never close. Well, a few months later, we had those, not even a few months, it was a few weeks. We had those back-to-back blizzards, and they closed. We can't be closed in a blizzard because the plows need to go. So that really concerned me at the time, and it's stuck in my mind. So for right now, we're putting money into capital reserve. It doesn't hurt us to put it into reserve. We will take our year or two, and we will do more research on it and see, where we end up. But it won't hurt us to at least start saving for it if we have to do it, if that's the road we want to go down. Okay, so 80,000 is going into that. Last year, we put 130,000 in. 100,000 was to help for the demolition of the pool, and 30,000 was due to Wiley. Remember the 30,000 he wanted to put towards the police vehicle, which I'm glad he did because that's helpful for 2021. So our total now, this number will be slightly different because of that 250. So you want to look at 15,319,191. That represents $1,139,937 difference, 8%. In comparison to the 2020 budget. So what we're proposing to do is we want to utilize our excess carryover to balance the budget. We've basically been doing that for many years now. It's a little over 3.5 million. This is probably the most carryover that I'm proposing to use. It's usually not that high, but because we're projecting our revenue, because we're just not sure, so we're being a little bit conservative and budgeting the revenue maybe a little bit less than where it may be, but we just don't know because of COVID. We really don't. I mean, every day we're hearing something about more businesses or certain industries that have been greatly affected. And, you know, from, like I said earlier, the Brookings Institute, their report and other reports that we're hearing, this is probably going to be a 3-year deal. We're probably going to see revenue losses for 3 years. So that's just something that we need to, I think, be somewhat conservative with our numbers. So last year was when we're looking at salary and benefits. You know, being in government, that takes up a large portion of your operating budget. It represented last year 80.37% of the expenditures. That was the lowest percentage since my administration has prepared budgets for City Council. So it has ranged between 82.64% in 2019, and in 2013, it was a high of 84.50%. So over the last decade, that's been the range. So in budget year 2021, it's going to be, when we're looking at the percentage of employees' salary and benefits compared to the total expenditures, 81.36%. So it's still our second lowest. So it's still really good. It means that more of our expenditures are going towards operating and capital expenditures rather than budget and salaries. And that's what we've been trying to obtain since I got into office with negotiating our contracts and looking at some of those things and also saving for these projects. So that's a very good thing. So if I have to say what's the little ray of sunshine in all of this, it would be that number. And then the consumer price index, I always throw that in there for you. I use 2 different ones. We have the Philadelphia, Wilmington area. That increased by only 0.42%. And then the CPI for the Northeast urban, that increased by a little over 1%. It was 1.04% in mid-October. So yes, our contracts, which were negotiated several years ago, are set at 3%. So it is higher than what is going on right now. But for the most part, most of the other years, they were fairly close. But this year is a year that cannot be compared to. So that is the 2021 budget package, gentlemen. Now, we do have the liquid fuel and the capital reserve budgets on the end that you can take a look at. We don't usually go over those line item by line item, but the liquid fuel is the money that we get from the state. It's from the tax on gasoline. And we also have a small amount that comes in for winter maintenance of reimbursement for snow removal that we do on just like 3 small portions of state highways. And then there's a turnback allocation that I believe is Oak Street. That's at $37,240. So we have a little, not quite $744,000 coming into liquid fuel. And of course, all of the plowing, salt, de-icing, if we have to haul snow, the maintenance of any bridges, the engineering for our paving project, the electricity at the traffic signals and the street lights, that's the big one, the electricity for the street lights. All of that comes out of this fund. You can only use this fund for very specific expenditures. You cannot use it to replace curb. You can't, only ADA ramps. You can't use it to replace sidewalks. You can't use it to do something at a park. It's very specifically related to streets. We've been saving for the last couple of years. We've been doing less paving projects out of the liquid fuel fund and doing more out of the CDBG funding so that we can take some of our money and hold it back for the 422-72 resurfacing project so that we have enough money for our share. So if you look at the last item and you see balance and reserve, that's so that we can meet our obligation with PennDOT and the feds. If you look at the capital reserve fund, when I first came on board as mayor, we did not have a capital reserve fund. We didn't even have enough money to balance our budget. We had an $850,000 deficit on the budget when I first started. So I'm very proud of my team that we've been able to not only balance our budget, but start a capital reserve fund and get money in that capital reserve fund that we are able to save for very important projects that we've been accomplishing over the last several years. So as you can see, when you look at the capital reserve fund, we are saving for, of course, the Stavers Dam project that we are required to do by DEP. We have some money in there for police vehicles or equipment. We have some money, barely anything in there for just general fire vehicles and equipment, but that will be changing. We have money for fire engines. Again, not a lot, but that will change as well. We have $300,000 in to demolish Coleman Park Pool. And if we don't need all of that, we can either allocate it to other categories or save it towards the splash pad or something like that that we are proposing to do out there at Coleman's Park. And then we also have money that we're saving for replacing those fuel tanks, general highway equipment replacements. And we have to save for street sweepers because they're very expensive. And we were going to replace one this year, but when we got the price of it and what they were going to give us for what I thought was an almost new street sweeper, I was not happy. So we need to regroup and see what we're going to do maybe for next year. And then we also have some money in here for parks. And we have $100 that a citizen had made a contribution to go towards Butex Park. And I think you guys received an email from a prior councilman that asked if that could be used for a park bench or something. So that may end up going to zero. We have to finish looking at that. Okay. So there's one question.
Okay. Good.
I'm looking at the budget here without any background information. However, looking at the total sums at the end of the proposal, it appears that while it was originally predicted that the 2020 budget would be approximately $1.645 million over budget, which is on page 25.
Mhm.
In reality, it cost approximately $1.581 million under budget. Considering the actual revenues, expenditures, ultimately my questions here are, is this accurate and where is this theoretically additional surplus allocated?
Okay, so that is what we call the excess carryover that we've been utilizing to balance the budget. And we sometimes, well, we usually always do better than budget. And so usually our revenue, we hope, because we work very hard to have our revenue come in higher than when we budgeted. And then we also try very hard to keep our expenditures lower than what we had budgeted. So that is, and it was great that this happened because of COVID, we need more money to help that gap because we will have a gap. So it actually was a budgeted number. We did better than budget. And so there's actually more excess carryover, which we're going to need in 2021 because of our anticipated, loss of revenue. It's a very good question.
And for several years.
Mhm. Does council have any questions?
Good job. Good job.
Yeah, impressive.
Maybe, Alisher, if you do have a question, maybe you could just write yes or no, because if not, we're going to wrap it up.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I want to thank the public for participating. Council, Mayor, you and your team, and Miss Helen over there, fantastic job. Again, thank you so much. We cannot say how much of a blessing you are to the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to call this meeting. Anybody else have anything else to share? Okay, meeting is closed. Have a wonderful evening.
And we'll see you Thursday. Yeah, Thursday at 4:45.
Are we here or are we Zoom? Okay. Is that the
standard
going
Are we here?
Oh, no, I thought we were Zoom.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
Oh, okay, I thought we were here.
What do you want to do?
Zoom's fine.
You tell me.
That's a real quick.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a real short one.
Yeah.
Do you even want to, bother to come in?
You Zoom's fine.
Zoom's fine.
Yeah, because it is a real quick.
Zoom it
It's
is.
just Zoom.
Okay, Zoom it is.
It's
The,
easier to do the public via Zoom, actually, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
When it's hard when you can't hear them.
yeah, I understand. Pre-council is the following Thursday. Are we able to do that here?
And the only thing is, we have the public like that instead of you being able to hear them. I mean, I thought we had that turned up, that we tested it.
Well,
The speaker's on.
I didn't say, even the person typed in a comment. I don't know that they had. I don't know, I guess what we should try to do a live one with three of us. See if we can
Yeah, I thought we did test
We
that.
do
get,
it,
not like live.
we do it as part of a group that I'm part of every Tuesday morning. We have a hybrid meeting. Some people come by Zoom, some people come in person, and it works pretty well.
Yeah,
Um,
and we participate in those as well. It's just with this system, logging on there and then logging on her and making her co-host. We have to go through those speakers, and we did test it and we could hear from it.
Yeah.
But I don't know why tonight, unless he didn't have audio.